2025 NFL Draft is in the books. So what grade should we be giving Sean Payton, George Payton on the Denver Broncos on their haul? Will Shedeur Sanders, after slipping all the way to the 5th round of the NFL Draft, have a legitimate chance to start for the Cleveland Browns? With Gabe Landeskog back on the ice and looking, frankly, better than ever, can the Dallas Stars stop the Colorado Avalanche in this series? And what does it mean for their Stanley Cup hopeful ceiling in 2025? And finally, we saw a historic, unbelievable ending to the Denver Nuggets LA Clippers game, evening the series. And could it have long-term potential ramifications beyond this season with a potential roster shakeup coming in the future? All things to come on today's rundown, but we begin in the NFL, where, as I mentioned, the 2025 NFL Draft has been completed. Teams now know what their draft class looks like and have slotted post-free agency to fill their rosters as best as possible. And the Denver Broncos started things off with a little bit of a bang, a surprise, and something that maybe left a sour taste in some people's mouths. And it has me questioning and wondering, and I'll ask you this question, our loyal listeners, what grade are you giving the Denver Broncos now that we see the class in its entirety? And when you look at the class, starting with the 20th overall pick, Shedeur Sanders, the cornerback out of Texas, the Broncos standing pat and choosing to go defense despite needs and holes on the roster on the offensive side of the ball at running back and tight end, and potentially some tough decisions at defensive tackle coming up. Then in the second round, they end up trading back twice before selecting UCF running back R.J. Harvey. In the third round, they pick up some wide receiver help in Pat Bryant, and then a little bit of a defensive focus for the middle rounds of the draft on day 3 with Savion Jones, Q Robinson, a punter in Jeremy Crenshaw. Anytime you see a kicker or a punter drafted, it raises a little bit of an eyebrow before the ultimate eyebrow-raising wild card pick in Caleb Lohner, the tight end, former basketball player out of Utah. So I guess we'll just start from the beginning and work our way down when it comes to evaluating this Broncos draft class. They started the draft process with 7 picks, and they finished with 7 picks. But after pick number 20, their originally slotted first-round pick, they executed a series of 5 trades to move up and down in the later rounds of the draft from 2 through 7 and reslotted their entire pick allotment. I was live at the Sportsbook Bar and Grill in DTC on draft night Thursday when the Broncos selected Shedeur Sanders, 20th overall, and I did not see a single reputable, high-profile mock draft that had the Broncos going in that direction, mostly because very few saw Shedeur Sanders falling outside of the Miami Dolphins slotted pick earlier in the first round. So if a player's not there in the vast majority of projections and big board rankings and the like, it's hard to predict him coming to the Denver Broncos. Most painfully, I guess, in hindsight, we saw this happen with Bradley Chubb in the 2018 draft, where he fell outside of the top 4 with the Cleveland Browns choosing the cornerback Denzel Ward, and John Elway never thinking that Bradley Chubb was going to be there. You can call it a panic pick. You can call it an impulse pick, a gut pick, whatever you want to call it. He took Bradley Chubb with Josh Allen sitting out on the chopping block, on the available options list, and a guy who played right down the road, and we saw how the trajectory of those two franchises changed after that moment. And Shedeur Sanders, my takeaway from it was, as a premium position like cornerback and edge rusher, if we're talking specifically, it's hard to argue you can have too much depth at that position. And so when you have a top 10 talent slip all the way to the 20th overall pick in a draft where it was pretty universally considered that there weren't more than 15 or 18 first-round grades in the first round of this draft, and you had one fall outside the top 18 to number 20, it's a little bit hard to fault that logic, because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, adding good football players and great football players to your roster, especially ones that are versatile and can complement different parts of your system, is rarely a bad thing. And I think George Payton, frankly, foreshadowed this happening. George and Sean Payton did in their pre-draft presser, where they said, we're not going to step over Crystal like Shedeur Sanders, a top 10 talent, because we need a blender or a running back in this case. And that's exactly what happened. When Marion Hampton was on the board at pick 20, he goes 2 picks later to the Los Angeles Chargers. They did not step over what they believe to be Crystal, a rare, true first-grade talent on their big board who fell to 20 just to supersede the need at running back. So my initial takeaway on that was, hey, I get it. I like the logic, but you better nail the running back pick because that need is still glaring and still pressing, and it has to be, in my opinion, addressed in the first 2 rounds of the draft, because any deeper than that, and you're really running the gambit on whether or not you're going to get a starter face of the running back room franchise piece, which the Broncos clearly were missing last season with Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime. It didn't matter who was starting among those 3, with Tyler Bidet and Blake Watson as well contributing. There wasn't a true face, and it really made the Broncos offense one-dimensional. So we get to Friday, to day 2. They trade back twice, and this is after Quinshon Judkins goes number 1 in terms of the running backs on day 2 off the board, and then Travion Henderson not that far afterwards. So the Broncos, it seemed like maybe they were targeting Travion Henderson and they couldn't get the right deal or the right price to move up and get him. So instead, they elect to trade back, recoup some day 3 assets, and select the UCF running back R.J. Harvey. Right there on the principle, I struggle a little bit with that pick because you were patient and let the draft come to you in round 1, and it allowed you to have the option of taking a luxury pick at a premium position with a top 10 talent. And I don't understand why the next phase wouldn't be to be aggressive and say, hey, we were patient in round 1 and we netted a gem and we sacrificed addressing a position of need to do it. Why not then be aggressive and go after a Quinshon Judkins, who they spent intimate time with in the pre-draft process, a Travion Henderson, who they flew out to go see and who fits a lot of the mold, the archetype of running back that we think Sean Payton needs in that system. He's a capable or above average pass protector. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And he was a 1,000-yard rusher, 1,200-yard rusher with a running mate in the backfield who also exceeded that total. So he's a productive player in a big-time university in the Big Ten, competing at a national championship level, and they don't. And maybe they couldn't get it done. Maybe they had no interest in it. Some of those things will just be lost to the mystery of the draft room. But they settle on R.J. Harvey, and I think that move, that decision, is ultimately going to determine the success or the failure of this 2025 draft class, is how well the UCF running back R.J. Harvey, who's listed at about 5'8", 205, which is shorter and leaner than me. I don't think I would do very well in an NFL backfield, but I'll tell you this. R.J. Harvey makes 5'8", 205 look a lot better than I do at 5'9", 220. So I'm optimistic. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm definitely curious. But R.J. Harvey's ability to step in and be the RB1, the face of the running back room, and add the complementary piece to the Bo Nix-led offense that was missing last season will ultimately be the success or failure determinator for this draft class, which right now, I don't think you can give comfortably much higher than I would say a C+, because they also have needs at wide receiver, which they address with Pat Bryant in the next round. But this wasn't, in my opinion, somebody that you heard a lot about during the pre-draft process, the big boards and the speculation that was going on nationally and locally. He's not that dynamic impact receiver that we were talking about, mirroring the potential to take a Tedero McMillan or a Matthew Golden or a Luther Burden in the first or early second rounds. He doesn't quite profile like that. What he profiles closely to me in this initial glance is Courtland Sutton. And I think you could do worse than that, than having another big body wide receiver who's hefty enough and tall enough to make contested catches and be physical with the ball. And if you're looking at him profiling as an ex-receiver, then I guess the hope and the projection with Sean Payton at the helm is that he becomes the Sean Payton Broncos edition of a Marcus Colston or a Michael Thomas, who Sean Payton was able to use in a Joker-like way and get creative with and move all around the field as kind of that ex-receiver archetype. And so maybe it exists. I do know the one thing that seems to reign loud and clear, I guess I should say the two things that reign loud and clear when it comes to Pat Bryant is, one, he's a leader. He was a team captain. He's very well-spoken, wise beyond his young years, in my opinion. And I do think that George Payton has put an emphasis in his time as the GM of the Denver Broncos in going out of his way to add high character, high IQ individuals, which again, kind of like depth at pass rusher and corner, it's hard to say you can have too many high character, high IQs in a locker room. But they also need to make plays too, because I think it's maybe eyebrow raising, I don't want to say concerning, that the biggest thing that jumps off the page to me with those that evaluate Pat Bryant is that he's a willing and able and aggressive blocker. I think you need to have wide receivers that are willing to get their nose dirty in the run game and not do the Jerry Jeudy route where if they're not getting the ball, they're running wind sprints and they're selling out, basically allowing the defense to shade away. But I want a guy that can catch some passes too, because there's still a lot of unprovens behind an aging Courtland Sutton in this wide receiver room. Marvin Mims took a nice step forward and kind of played the Joker role by force because of the lack of playmakers that the Broncos had on offense this past season. And I think you can hope for another step forward with him as he maybe gets relegated more outside into what I like the way Cecil Lammey describes it as the Riddler role. If Evan Ingram is going to be your Joker, at least the face of it right now, who you acquired in free agency, and Marvin Mims can slide a little bit further outside as your outside Joker or your Riddler, then I think that allows for some opportunity for progression. You hope that Devon Vele, the late-round pick from last year, who kind of leapfrogged the production and the excitement of Troy Franklin, takes another step and is another key piece in the offense. And Troy Franklin, who kind of came on in spurts toward the end of the season, punctuating it with the opening scoring drive touchdown against the Buffalo Bills in the wild card round, that maybe you see the connection and chemistry that those two had in college manifest a little more. But all of those things behind Courtland Sutton, who's on the wrong side of 30 and whose future beyond this season as of this moment is not known. There's a lot of unprovens, and I think a lot of people would be right for saying that they maybe wanted a little bit more juice out of the addressing of that position than Pat Bryant. And I get he says things like no block, no rock, and that's just a great clippy soundbite. And I think, again, the high character, high IQ aspect of it, I think he's going to be a great piece of leadership and learning in that locker room that's filled with young guys just like him. But again, I just think that you're rolling the dice a lot with that wide receiver room, just like you're rolling the dice on RJ Harvey. And now that's a lot of dice rolls for the first 3 rounds of a pivotal draft that has the immediate impact on the Broncos to maintain their identity as a playoff contender and beyond. And then, like I said in the beginning, when we flashed the draft class, anytime a punter or a kicker gets drafted, even on day 3 in the later rounds, that is a little bit of an eyebrow raise, because I don't think there is a lot of competition, traditionally speaking, in the draft for those players. And so an undrafted free agent signing probably could have been in play. The Broncos clearly felt like they didn't want to wait. And for whatever it's worth, Crenshaw was pretty widely considered the best punter in the 2025 class. So if you're going to spend a top 5 round draft pick where the Browns elected to go Shedeur Sanders and give them playmaking ability in that regard, using it on a punter, that punter better produce. And I will say, not just because of the draft slotting and where it's laid out for Crenshaw, but special teams, which was the bane of the Denver Broncos' existence for so long in the last decade post Super Bowl 50 or so. And things started to click and get right and get better. And the revolving door at special teams coordinator from Brock Olivo to Tom McMahon. And you had the dual role at special teams coordinator just this past season with Ben Katwika and Mike Westhoff. It seems to be slowing, and there seems to be more consistency and reliability from that group. If you have a punter, like we've seen here in Denver, that just cannot hack it or kick it, for lack of a better term, it is going to significantly impact the way that the rest of the team operates. Just like if you have a field goal kicker that can't make field goals beyond a certain distance, or he's just got the yips and is seeing ghosts from beyond X yardage, that changes how you operate things offensively. If you've got a punter that's constantly putting your defense in a bad position with short fields and not doing the adequate job of keeping things balanced for the offense and the defense to be able to operate, that's going to be a problem. And we run a little bit of a risk with Crenshaw and Matt Hack, the other punter who's just now new here in town, because things seem to be going all right. And the Broncos do have a little bit of a history of letting punters go, perhaps maybe unnecessarily or a little bit early, and then watching those punters go on to have success of varying degrees with other teams that supersede whoever the Broncos chose to replace. And then the ultimate eyebrow raiser, curiosity, boom or bust type pick, in my opinion, in this draft was the Broncos taking the tight end out of Utah, the former basketball player at the University of Baylor, who transitions to football at the University of Utah and is 6'8", good size, good height. And in my opinion, this was Sean Payton and George Payton collectively throwing up a little bit of a prayer to say, this guy's going to be our next Julius Thomas, who, of course, had basketball background as well. We saw Hall of Famers like Tony Gonzalez have the same kind of background. Antonio Gates, the longtime tight end for the Chargers. And frankly, under the tutelage of Sean Payton, Jimmy Graham, who once was so famously used outside of the traditional tight end role that he wanted to be franchise tagged as a wide receiver because of the money difference and the usage rate with which he was being used off the line of scrimmage and split out wide as a receiver. So a 7th-round pick is a little bit of a dart throw in general. Were there probably more established, capable tight ends on the board? But this to me felt like the ultimate, let's heave up a prayer with no time left on the clock and see if we can find the bottom of the basket. Because if they do, that again takes some pressure off of the offensive skill unit players to be able to amplify their production in the sophomore season with Bo Nix. Outside of the Denver Broncos draft, which raised a lot of eyebrows, and I think they went so far off of the way a lot of prognosticators predicted them to go, the biggest storyline of the NFL draft, regardless of city, market, team, what have you, was the slide and fall of Shedeur Sanders all the way to the 5th round, getting selected 144th overall after the Cleveland Browns had selected Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel. I don't have the stat in front of me, but I believe they're one of the only teams in recent memory to select 2 quarterbacks in back-to-back rounds or day 2 to day 3 quarterback picks in a singular draft. And beyond that, that was a quarterback room in Cleveland that was already crowded. When you look at the names on the Browns quarterback room right now, as it currently sits, you have a 30-year-old Deshaun Watson who's coming off of season-ending injury after season-ending injury on a fully guaranteed contract that is just a anchor dragging the Cleveland Browns to the NFL's respective basement. They signed a 40-year-old Joe Flacco, who most recently played with the Colts on a 1-year deal and helped take the Browns to the playoffs just a handful of years ago. Kenny Pickett was signed in the offseason, the 27-year-old Super Bowl champion backup quarterback with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then, as you see there, the aforementioned Dillon Gabriel, 25-year-old QB out of Oregon, slots in just ahead of Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. And you look at that room and you say there's 5 bodies, 3 veterans, and 2 draft picks already in that room. What a nightmare for a guy who was once projected to be the odds-on favorite as the number 1 overall pick in the draft over Cam Ward to have that kind of fall from grace and prominence all the way to the 5th round, only to join a room where the team has invested more in the quarterback position than any other team in the NFL this offseason. And there isn't a lot of confidence that Deshaun Watson can play. And even when he has played with Cleveland, he's looked abysmal. So you can almost knock that one off of the board. But then you have Joe Flacco, who's an even more of a stopgap short-term option than Deshaun Watson at this point, even if he's playing at a little bit higher of an individual level. Kenny Pickett presents like the Browns trying to do what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did with Baker Mayfield, what the Seahawks and previously the Vikings tried to do with Sam Darnold, where you take a quarterback who's in his late 20s, mid to late 20s, hasn't quite hit that 30-year mark where the prime can start to really bell curve off, and you try to catch lightning in a bottle without having to draft a rookie to do so. So Kenny Pickett could present a realistic threat for the Cleveland Browns based on the 2 options that are in front of them. And then you add into the mix of Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. They can't keep all these guys. So is this just going to be like a Hunger Games survival of the fittest to see which 3 ultimately make it out, even if it means cutting veterans that you paid free agency and guaranteed money to in some cases, along with the albatross that is Deshaun Watson's contract? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I think Shedeur Sanders might have a legitimate opportunity to start if he profiles like the quarterback amongst that other room that I still believe he has a chance to be at the NFL level, given proper coaching and tutelage. And the degree with which the Cleveland Browns are going to be willing to give that to him is frankly in jeopardy or up in the air, in my opinion, because when you looked at the draft room, when they finally announced Shedeur Sanders' pick, which Cleveland moved up ahead of a handful of other teams in order to do, not a single face in that room looked happy or excited about drafting a guy who made some noise in the Big 12 and at one point had his team on the doorstep of a college football playoff appearance and a Big 12 championship. And I don't think it's hard to understand why, because the looks on their faces told me that that decision didn't come from them, whether it was Haslam, the owner, or someone else in the front office in the upper echelon of that organization who made the call down and said, hey, we got to do this. And maybe there was some back channeling from Deion Sanders to help push that. And I'm not reporting that. Obviously, I have no intel other than speculation on that. But that did not look like a war room that has the head coach, the general manager, all the decision makers, assistant coaches, scouts, and the like. That did not look like a room that was pretty jazzed to have said, hey, we just got a premium talent at quarterback in the 5th round, almost 150th overall. And I think that right there is indicative of how the NFL truly feels about Shedeur Sanders and what predicated this massive slide from contention for number 1 overall to barely hanging on day 3 in the 5th round of the NFL draft. And it kind of forks in two different directions. One, I think it was clear that the NFL did not value or view the tape that Shedeur Sanders put together to be true NFL starting caliber quarterback play. And I think that is a fair assessment and evaluation. And if that is how they want to operate on it, as the people who scour and study this tape every single year to prepare for this kind of thing, if that's how they felt, and they're the ones with the keys to a multi-billion-dollar organization whose jobs are on the line, I'm going to give them a fair, at least an initial nod on that judgment. Because again, these are guys whose axe is to the grindstone 24/7. Their seat is never cool, realistically, in the NFL. So if they truly felt with their, again, multi-billion-dollar organization that they're pulling the levers for, if they felt like Shedeur Sanders was going to give them a chance to even win one more game based on the talent that he has presented as a collegiate quarterback, they would overlook certain things in order to draft that player. We see players with intelligence and character flaws and other issues all the time get drafted and drafted highly because of what they're able to do on a football field. So it would be completely counterintuitive for the NFL to just sidestep that path for this one particular player in this particular instance. Now, I do think this was indicative, whether it was the NFL sending a message, like I kind of felt after night 1 of the NFL draft on Thursday, or just a statement at large about Shedeur Sanders and the way that he and other prospects who are to come in this Wild West, never ceasing, ever expanding world of NIL and college football and the transfer portal, about how the NFL does business. And the more and more that comes out from the Tom Pelisseros and the Todd McShays and the like about how apparently unserious Shedeur Sanders took the pre-draft process, from the interview debacle with Brian Dable to the way that he had rubbed other anonymous scouts and things during their interview process the wrong way, it seems at least fair to speculate that Shedeur Sanders did not take the pre-draft interview process as seriously as he could. And you couple that with his decision not to throw at the combine, his decision to skip the Senior Bowl, to attend the East-West Shrine Game but not practice, to turn the pro day into more of a spectacle event than a true evaluation of talent. All of those things adding up to an NFL collective that just says, hey, we don't do business that way, and you are not good enough. You, Shedeur Sanders, are not talented enough to tip the scale back in the other direction and outweigh all of that baggage. Because let's be honest, when a team is drafting a quarterback outside of the first rounds, and frankly, even the first 2 rounds, they are not guaranteed immediately looking for that player to be a starter. They're looking for it to be a piece of the room, a developmental project, a backup, and behind the scenes type of character. So when you have a team looking at and evaluating what they believe to be a starting caliber player at this current juncture, but he comes with all of the circus and the hoopla and the hype that a typical starting caliber quarterback would take. That's not an attractive option for a team to try to take on, especially one that has uncertainty at the quarterback position. Think about the transition from Peyton Manning to Tim Tebow. There was a reason beyond the massive chasm of physical and above the neck talent from a football perspective that exists between Tim Tebow and a guy like Peyton Manning. But the hype and the hysteria of Tebow mania was so rabid to a certain degree, which I'll raise my hand as being 100% fully a part of for a good chunk of that time. That is not a distraction that you want when you're bringing in one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Peyton Manning, who has a lot of question marks around him because of his neck surgeries, the 4 surgeries over the course of an offseason, and genuine question marks about whether or not he would be able to play football at a high caliber again. The last thing you want when you're trying to look in that direction and put all your eggs in that basket is a backup quarterback who has a massive platform and spotlight and a rabid connection to the fan base, which Shedeur, like it or not, it's not a perfect parallel to Tim Tebow. He has a massive following, and everything he does and says is put under a microscope and blasted out to the NFL community. So I don't think it's that surprising that Shedeur fell to where he did, but I do think if he is able to put his head down, to separate himself from the Deion Sanders, the Coach Prime CU enigma that existed in college football and all the eyeballs that came along with it. If he's able to divorce from that, the way that Lonzo Ball famously divorced from his father once he went from UCLA to the NBA, and really focus on being the best NFL caliber quarterback that he can be, I think he has a chance to really make something happen in Cleveland. And I, of course, would hope that he does. I think that the way he was treated during the draft process, not by any of the teams themselves, but by the prank call from the son of the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, regardless of what you think or say about Shedeur, did he have some comeuppance coming to him? Was he maybe walking a little taller than he needed to be? And I think we as a society love to take people who kind of fit that caliber and see them knock down a peg. And I think that that's certainly what happened here with Shedeur. I just found that to be over the line, in my opinion. This is a young man who's clearly things aren't going the way that he thought, and he's going to have a much more difficult uphill and challenging path to NFL stardom than he previously had. And part of that is because of his own decision-making. But to add insult to injury from the son of an NFL coach who's not at all related to the process, the Falcons were never looking at Shedeur Sanders as an option, and for some cheap laughs on social media and the arrogance to post it afterwards, that really left a raw taste in my mouth. And I hope that it helps fuel Shedeur's kind of next chapter and how he approaches things in Cleveland. About 1,000 miles away from Cleveland, we saw maybe more than 1,000. We saw the Denver Nuggets complete one of the more epic comeback. You were ahead, but then had to come back slightly games in NBA postseason history, beating the Clippers in LA on a game-winning, buzzer-beating dunk from Aaron Gordon, which was the first of its kind in NBA postseason history. Never before had that particular sequence in a postseason game ever happened. It is the most miraculous, best-looking air ball from Nikola Jokic in the entirety of his already illustrious career. The heads-up savviness of an Aaron Gordon to be in that position when Jokic clearly had to take a little bit of a rushed, uncomfortable shot at the buzzer to try to make something happen with his signature Sombor shuffle, shooting off of his opposite foot while stepping back and fading away. He completely misses the mark, and Aaron Gordon is in perfect position to beat the buzzer by a literal photographic frame. We are talking less than 1/10 of a second that it took for him to take the ball from up above the cylinder and slide it through without his fingertips touching it at all. And even though I thought in the moment when I was watching it that he had cleared it and he made it through, just like he clearly knew, running off to the other side of the court while Nikola Jokic and Kawhi Leonard compete with each other to see who's less phased by it, I thought that they might not confirm the call in video replay or that the angle would be too close for them to tell. Thankfully, it wasn't, because in all honesty, that game saved the entire series for the Denver Nuggets. They still face an uphill battle coming back to Denver for Game 5, but that moment and that game ending in that way to keep things tied at 2-2 saves the entire series for Denver. Because if they lose that game and go down 3-1, I don't care about home court advantage. The Denver Nuggets were not coming back from 3-1 against this LA Clippers team, given the body of work that they've put in so far. And when you talk about Aaron Gordon, and I think David Adelman summed it up best when he was asked post-game about AG's contributions. He said, quote, "There are certain people in our league I would define as championship pieces. He is one of those people." And I could not agree more. I have said on the record multiple times, Aaron Gordon is my favorite Nugget of this current iteration. As much as we all love the Joker and Jokic, you're looking at a guy in Aaron Gordon who was the runaway best player on a terrible, terrible team in the NBA. And he made a difficult decision to swallow pride and reinvent himself as an NBA player to come to a place like Denver, change his role around, accept a backseat to the backseat, and just be a hard hat and lunch pail, show up to work and do what you got to do guy. And the amount of respect that I have for somebody like him, who at one point was a star, dazzling offensive player in the league and still shows flashes of it today. But for him to have the self-awareness and the maturity to be able to change the entire outlook and trajectory of his career from Orlando, coming to Denver with the Gary Harris trade, and not only do it, but have it succeed at the highest of levels, because make no mistake, they don't win an NBA championship, the Nuggets, without Aaron Gordon. He was tasked with guarding the most difficult defensive player in every series of that run, from Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert to LeBron James in LA, to Jimmy Butler of the Heat, to Kevin Durant and Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. Those are some of the best offensive skilled players in the NBA, and he managed to lock them down one by one. And is he getting older? Yes. Is there concerns with the health, especially in his lower body with his calf injuries and things of that nature? Yeah. But man, if I was the Denver Nuggets, who, depending on how the rest of this postseason goes, we could see pretty significant and severe shakeups on the roster, I agree with David Adelman, and I think Aaron Gordon would be a must-keep piece alongside. There's never any absolutes, but if we're ranking the players to get, potentially jettisoned to blow up and rebuild this roster, I think Aaron Gordon is right up there behind Nikola Jokic in terms of players I want to rebuild around. And maybe that's Jokic, AG, and Christian Brown. Maybe Jamal Murray or MPJ is in that mix, because I don't think you can or should keep both based on the moves you need to make and the weaknesses you need to shore up. But I do not have enough positive things to say about Aaron Gordon, who saved the series for the Denver Nuggets over the weekend, and maybe at least delayed, if not shifted, the potential for this team to make a run beyond this round and see where the dice fall in the second round in Western Conference Finals and beyond, which will then impact how they approach their offseason with a new head coach and a new GM that will be coming into the fold. The only thing I think more miraculous than Aaron Gordon's dunk, not because of the individual effort, but because of the saga and the story that is built up to it, was the way that the Colorado Avalanche absolutely smacked the Dallas Stars. And that is where we will go inside the action, presented by Embers Living. Elevate your outdoor living with full luxury outdoor kitchens featuring Twin Eagles appliances. The Dallas Stars, after taking a 2-1 lead, despite leading for only 62 combined seconds of this first-round playoff series, were met with a blunt force trauma response from the Colorado Avalanche, who out-physicaled, hustled, and muscled the Dallas Stars for the majority of that game, making themselves look like the better team by a pretty decent disparity. And it came from some of the usual suspects. I think Logan O'Connor is having the postseason of his career in some aspects with how present he has been on the stat sheet and as a shift mate on that fourth line. But it's the suspects who kind of were mainly responsible for the demise in Game 3, primarily Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. They came back with a vengeance. You could tell right away that Cale Makar was hunting for the back of that net, and he was not going to be denied until he turned around enough to erase the slump that he clearly experienced in Game 3. And Nathan MacKinnon, as he is wont to do, despite a few dips on the radar like we saw last game, was on a mission. He looked sharp, he looked tight, and he looked aggressive. And the fact that it was punctuated by a goal from the captain, Gabriel Landeskog, who had been moved up to the second line from the third line where he shared with Charlie Coyle and Joel Kiviranta. He moves up to the second line. He moves on to the top power play line. And every single chunk that they continue to give this guy, he continues to absorb it in stride. It is frankly unbelievable to me as someone who, again, I'll never hesitate to raise my hand when I'm wrong or I potentially misread something. The way that Gabe Landeskog has come back into the fold after more than 1,000 days away from the game of hockey and just a short tune-up stint with the Colorado Eagles over 2 games and jumped right into action and had to be elevated, sometimes looking like the best forward on the ice, like I thought he was in Game 3, is nothing short of amazing. And this miraculous comeback that I could not have foreseen coming, it is the literal definition of the Disney story return. It will make for unbelievable cinema with the TNT docuseries that's being filmed. But beyond all of that, man, on a personal note, from a personal level, to see that puck go through the back of the net to help the Avs go up 3-0 and really put a chokehold on the Dallas Stars in the back half of that game, to see the elation on his face and the way he skated past the bench and everybody giving him a fist pound, Nathan MacKinnon wrapping him up. It just, you can tell how much he means to that locker room, and by permeation and osmosis, how much he just frankly means to this team from a connectivity standpoint, but also, as he's evidenced, from a skill and production standpoint. It's amazing, and I truly think that when we were talking about over the course of even just this current year, 2025 that we're in, that we may be looking at a best case scenario where Gabe Landeskog is 50 to 60% of his Stanley Cup Series self. We are not only blowing past that in the early return to the ice for Gabe, but we are looking at a situation where this level of Gabe, the way that he's playing, if he can maintain a presence on that line where I felt like he gave a lift to Brock Nelson in particular, and even Val Nichushkin, if this is the Gabe that we're getting and the Avs that are coming together as a result of it, this is a genuine Stanley Cup contending team that I don't think we always felt that even in this series, despite the way that they've led for most of it. But with Gabe back and a healthy and sober Val and Nate and Cale firing on all cylinders and the collective boost that we got from them in Game 4 that we kind of thought we would get in Game 3 with his initial return, this is going to be a hard team to beat, especially if, and another thing I'll raise my hand at, just like Aaron Gordon's my favorite Nugget of all time, at least of this current iteration, Mackenzie Blackwood is making me such an unabashed defender. I could not be happier with what he has been able to do as a baby and a rookie in the postseason sense, with the lack of experience that he has and being able to face the depth of a forward group like Dallas has and the way that they play that physical cycle the puck to death style of hockey and really just cramming him up in the offensive zone. I think he's been amazing, and he's having to go toe-to-toe with a pretty damn good goalie in Jake Ottinger himself. So all in all for the Avalanche, I think I said that this game that we just saw on Sunday was going to be a massive decider in the series, and I think the Avalanche winning this game and heading into Game 5 is genuinely going to be, if they can win this game, just like I didn't think that the Avs or the Nuggets could come back from down 3-1, if they can go into this game and go up 3-2 and have to just win one of the last 2 games, home ice advantage be damned, I think the Avalanche are able to move past this series and establish themselves firmly as the better team and hopefully face a Winnipeg Jets team that has fallen apart and may not even beat St. Louis, as playoff Hellebuck is just melting before our very eyes, getting pulled the way that Ottinger got pulled for the Stars. That is our Inside the Action presented by Embers Living. And man, you can't ask for much more of an action-packed weekend of sports than what we got from the NFL draft and all of the storylines that will come out of that and the prognosticating and projecting that we will get to do as to how these brand new pieces fit onto the Broncos game board, combined with massive series-saving wins for both the Avs and the Nuggets as we roll into another action-packed week here starting tonight at about 7:30. It's going to be a blast, man. And I can't wait to react with it all to you tomorrow, in which case we will see you then. Give us a follow on all of our social media channels. Like and subscribe to our YouTube if you haven't. At DEN Sports 1043 on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All of the content there for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And frankly, we're covering it all, and we have it all there available for you. So on that note, we'll see you later. We'll catch you tomorrow. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the